Dube Trade Port and Richards Bay in Atlantis in the Western Cape. Now in Musina as well, I think there's an attempt to establish special economic zones in Harrismith as a trade link between the Free State and KwaZulu-Natal. There's another one too, which might be established in Komati Port as well, as a link between Mozambique and South Africa. So all those land parcels are under the custodianship of the state, and then the state invites investors to invest with specific purposes and guidelines in terms of what should happen. But also some of the attempts by the Department of Land and Rural Development currently with the land release programs was based on the fact that the state will remain custodian, that those who want to be involved in agriculture will be given land for a certain period of time. It can be 20, 30 years, and then if they utilize it productively, they'll continue to use it further. But the whole issue of wholesale trading of land means that someone with a lot of money can buy the entirety of South Africa from the current private landowners.
Yeah.
Someone can just come with $1 trillion or $1 trillion or €1 trillion and say, I'm offering you like a take it or leave it. And people will opt for the money and then they dispose of the land. And we're just going to have sovereignty nominally when majority of South Africa is owned by private individuals. So we do not want a situation where land, which is our inheritance, but also is what we must bequeath to the future generation, can at some stage be bought wholly by one or two individuals because of their control of money.
There was a report, I think was it last year, with the landing of the UAE leader in the Eastern Cape. And I don't know if it has been established as yet whether he does indeed own any of the land. And this is like we're speaking about a leader of another country, the possibility of a leader of another country owning land in another country.
Yes, yeah, he actually does. So these huge pieces of land in the Eastern Cape, in the region which is called Sarabartman now, so that is the municipalities. There is Sundays River and Ndlambe municipality. That will be Port Alfred and Ado, where the Ado National Park is. So there is private game parks and reserves which are being owned by private individuals there. And then one of the royalties from the Emirates bought that land and even got to upgrade the Bisho airport to be able to carry the jets which he was flying into South Africa through, and then came with a huge entourage to go and utilize his land for whatever private purposes. And it looks like it becomes top secret because a lot of people were involved even at the most senior level of national government.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, in conversation with Floyd Shivambu, the Deputy President of the EFF, if we look at the economic proposals as per the manifesto, if you have any questions for him, you can give us a call on 086 000 2032, and you can also drop me a voice note on 0614 104 107. And remember that we're also streaming live on Facebook as well as YouTube, so we'll look at some of the comments from those platforms as well. Before we move on from the land question, one, you're also saying limit the land owned by an individual. I think this is one of the proposals that was also made in the Presidential Land Reform Committee, that report by the Presidential Land Reform Committee. But then there's also the one about Ingonyama Trust. And where does the EFF stand with the Ingonyama Trust?
So, I think to understand the dynamics around Ingonyama Trust is that you must understand its brief history. So, the homelands under apartheid used to mostly be controlled by prime ministers or chief ministers. So, Mangosuthu Buthelezi, because he was the chief or prime minister of KwaZulu homeland, he had control of the land which currently belongs to Ingonyama Trust. So, as part of the CODESA negotiations for a transition from apartheid to democracy, the IFP, which Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi represented, and the royal family then contended that the land under the KwaZulu homeland must not be transferred to the common ownership and control by the South African new government. They then created a trust which was proclaimed into law by former president of apartheid, F.W. de Klerk, on the 24th of April 1994, 3 days before the elections which took place on the 27th of April 1994. And then that law said that the all the land will belong to Isilo Samabandla, who is obviously whoever is the incumbent king of the Zulu nation will be the sole trustee.
Sole trustee, yeah.
But with later on adaptation of that Ingonyama Trust into the constitutional laws, I think the amendments that took place in 2007 got to transfer the entirety of Ingonyama Trust and the land that it owns to the state. So the entirety of the land which is owned by Ingonyama Trust Board or by Ingonyama Trust belongs to the state, to the extent that the Department of Rural Affairs and Land Development is the one that is a custodian of Inganyama Trust Board. It can dissolve it, it can reconstitute it, it can literally have administration over it. That is why the Inganyama Trust Board accounts to Parliament, the Portfolio Committee, that is responsible for that. But in a broad political context, ourselves as the EFF is that we don't have a problem with state custodianship of the land. What we need to legislatively clarify is who then becomes responsible for land administration. And we think that to a defined and certain extent, traditional leaders should play a role in the administration of land. Because if you say that traditional leaders must not play a role at all, then you are abolishing traditional leadership in South Africa.
So are you saying repeal or are you saying amend?
It has to be adapted, it has to be amended to be much more suitable. But also there must be contours that are defined as to just how do traditional leaders allocate land to people. Do they collect rent? Is that permissible? And do they continue to exercise the archaic and wrong practices of excluding women in the allocation of land in terms of what happens? But also, how do you deal with the issue of same piece of land being allocated to several people? So all of those issues have to be clarified in terms of, including companies, yeah. That has to be clarified so that there is proper land administration. But the custodianship component must never be taken away, because the land must always belong to all of us. And then those who have to use it must use it for specific purpose. We can't own land forever.
Okay.
It's not an ideal situation.
Let's quickly go to the line. Keith is joining us from the Free State. Keith, good evening. Thank you so much for calling in. Please be brief.
Thank you so much, Aldrin. Floyd, thank you so much for taking my question or just a comment. Land, I agree with the policy of land ownership. What I'm having a problem with in our country, just as much as we talk about land, water goes with the land. At this stage, we are sitting with 90% of agricultural water owned by white people. And now, in terms of, because it's also an economic driver, just as land is, how are we going to address the ownership of water?
Okay, thank you so much, Keith, from the Free State. And your manifesto does actually speak about this question about privately owned bulk water.
Yes, but do you know the legislation in South Africa, by the way, is that all of South Africa's water is under the custodianship of the state. Whoever is involved in water projects get water use rights to either extract from the rivers or to reticulate and to put into bulk supply systems. So that is basically what the legislative foundation of water management is all about in South Africa currently. So what we're talking about in the land question is happening to the water component. And it also happens in the mineral resources as well, that all minerals in South Africa are under the custodianship of the state. Whoever wants to mine has to get permission from the state. So we're not proposing something fundamentally different. But there has to be optimal exploitation and extraction of water resources in South Africa, so that we are not a water scarce country. Because South Africa is a water scarce country, not because we can't fully exploit or get to extract the water for everyone's use, including for agricultural and industrial purposes, but because we've got incompetent government. Like, if you were to check the number of water treatment works that are functional in South Africa, it's like literally less than 50%. And there have been very few water extraction and reticulation programs and projects that were carried out since 1994. Even the dams that got to be constructed, there's been inability to extract the water from the dams and put them into pipelines to destinations. Like, if you can check the example which is spoken about every time of the water from Nandoni Dam to Giyani, the project has been there for like 15, 18, 20 years. and the people of Guyana still do not have water. The same thing with Jozini Dam in the north of KwaZulu-Natal. Almost all the surrounding areas there, in Amachibini, in Mhlabalingana, in Mtubatuba, in Tlutluwe and Big Five Hlabisa, there is no water. And there is proximity of water projects as well that could be finalized utilizing the Jozini Dam, but no one else is extracting that optimally and fully. The same in the Eastern Cape as well. Like there have been an attempt to take water from the dams that have been constructed, but the government is perennially incapable to run successful mega infrastructure projects, particularly that seek to benefit our people.
What do you think the issue there is? Because I remember even under the tenure of a former Minister of Water and Sanitation, Lindiwe Sisulu, she raised this issue about the private ownership that sometimes come with water. But then the point that was raised by some sustenance farmers was that some big farmers are actually diverting the water from the river.
Yes, that is the major problem. That is the bigger problem, where the water that is provided by the natural ecosystem through the rain and then the rivers. So a lot of commercial, exclusively white farmers will divert the rivers and extract the water for their own individual use. And then that deprives the other people from utilizing that water beneficially for themselves. So that is the point that we're dealing with, that we should deal with that much more differently in a way that is sustainable. But then, of course, there are many other solutions that we're proposing in terms of the water chapter, including removal of the salt in the seawater and then utilize it.
Desalination.
Yeah, desalination to make it to be
Where does the money come from? Because we're told that it's so expensive.
No, it's the expensive component of it is actually over-exaggerated. So I can tell you now that I know, because we lead the water department in Nelson Mandela Bay Municipality. We've been leading it, but for less than 12 months now, that if we were to go through what we propose on infrastructure, if we were to agree on a build, operate, transfer contract, we can be able to have those who can build a desalination plant and supply water to the entirety of Nelson Mandela Bay and the surrounding areas at the rates which we are buying from the water boards currently, from Amatola Water Board currently. So if we were to do a proper build, operate, transfer model in relation to desalination in Nelson Mandela Bay, we can be able to provide dependable and sustainable water to Nelson Mandela Bay, to all the municipalities from Kucha, Kukama, Sandys River.
And what cost per litre?
So the calculation practically which we actually had got to do was that it can be at the same rate as the water boards are supplying now, or even lesser.
Really?
Yes, it's possible. It's the expenses around it is just over exaggerated. I'm also aware of the very sound proposals and considerations that were brought to the city of eThekwini as well on desalination, but also on the reticulation of the wastewater. Because what happens now with all wastewater treatment plants is that they just treat the water for just disposal into the river streams or into the oceans.
Yeah.
There's no attempt to make the wastewater being reused again. But technology has advanced now to be able to clean the water, which was wastewater, back into the mainstream of agricultural use or industrial use or even household use that is adequate. So that the water systems can be much more improved. It just needs a decisive and clear government. And I want to actually speak about these things of BOT so that we can be able of the build, operate, transfer component which I mentioned in relation to water.
Yeah. Okay. I just quickly need to take this call from Nhlanhla, joining us from KwaZulu-Natal. Nhlanhla, good evening.
Good evening, my brother Oliver, and good evening.
It's Aldrin. Welcome.
Sorry, Aldrin, my brother. My brother, I would like to applaud the EFF on the issue of taking land without compensation, because they are being supported by challenging section the Constitution of 1961, Act 31, Section 12C, where it says unregistered landholders need to be compensated. So, and when you look at the preamble of the Constitution, the white people get to pay for taking the other people's land and destroying their culture so that they can dominate on the land that they've got no rights or possession. So I applaud the EFF to stand firm and challenge the issue of land.
Thank you so much, Ntlanta. Your quick comment, Floyd, and then when we come back, we'll deal with the other proposals, looking at the financial sector as well as the fiscal policy.
No, I think he is quite clear in terms of reaffirming our position on the land question. It's the only cogent and the most correct approach in terms of how we must deal with the land question. The attempts to redistribute land piece by piece have spectacularly failed since 1994. So if we were to read the manifestos of the ruling party from 1994, they always had,
seller.
Yeah, they always had the intention of redistributing 30% of the land in the first 5 years of government, 10 years. And then now it's 30 years. They have not yet redistributed 10% of the land.
And you're saying you're able to do 50%?
Yes, if you have got decisive action. It's not, by the way, a very complex thing if you know how to maximally and decisively utilize political power. I'm going to give a simple example that when the Minerals and Petroleum Resources Development Act was passed into law, it was just a simple majority vote in Parliament that took all the mineral rights from private owners to the custodianship of the state. Just a vote. That is political power being utilized decisively. And then the issue of how do you then transform the mining sector is an issue of how government deals with that, how government administers the mining licenses, expropriation licenses, exploration licenses, but also how you get to support mining. So the manner in which we will get to support the agriculture and industry and a variety of other interventions post making the land being under the custodianship of the state will be far much more aggressive because there's land hunger in South Africa.
Yeah, and also urban land hunger especially.
Yes.
0614-104-107. You can also drop me an X at Aldrin Sampear. We're in conversation with the Deputy President of the EFF, Floyd Shivambu. He's joining us in studio. Remember that we're also streaming live on Facebook as well as YouTube. We're also live on X, and we'll be taking some of your comments from those platforms as well. It's a minute after 4:30. Time for the news headlines.
Headlines. The Secretary to the National Assembly says the expiry date of the term of the 6th Parliament will be just before the election date on the 21st of May. President Ramaphosa has assured traditional leaders that authorities have been placed on high alert with regard to the spike in killings. And the Justice Ministers condemned the construction mafia delaying infrastructure projects like the building of the new Magistrates Court in Port Shepstone on the KZN South Coast. There's a full update at 6 o'clock.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic. This is SAFM Sports with Tuming Khapele.
In your sports this hour, let's start things off with rugby. Springbok scrum half Grant Williams has signed a new contract with the Sharks. The Sharks announced that Williams will be staying at Kings Park until the next World Cup, that's in 2027. Williams has come through the Sharks ranks after moving to Durban to play for club side College Rovers, and having made his Super Rugby debut in February 2018, he has tallied 54 first-class appearances for the Sharks, scoring 19 tries. In football, Kaizer Chiefs acting coach Kevin Johnson says that they don't regret not strengthening the team, particularly up front in the recent transfer window. And speaking to the media at the Nedbank Cup Marathon press conference at the PSL offices in Johannesburg today, Johnson expanded why there was no transfer activity at Naturena during the recent window. In the first half of the season, Amakosi strikers struggled to find goals and lacked a proven goal scorer, but Johnson has reiterated that they have a good team with which to finish the season strongly.
Like I said, when we took over, I think I was there 48 hours and the transfer window opened and transfer window closed. I thought if I was a coach that came into a group of people of 30 plus and said, you know what, not good enough, we need to strengthen. That means I have not taken my work or my work that I can do with a group of players and make them better. And that is the reason why we did not sign anybody in the transfer window. I think what we have at the club is good enough to take them to the end of the season and get them many points, and like I said earlier on, pray to God, get them one trophy.
Elsewhere, Brazilian soccer star Dani Alves has been found guilty of sexually assaulting a young woman in a Barcelona nightclub. The three-judge panel sentenced Alves to 4 years, 6 months. The 40-year-old denied any wrongdoing during a trial that took place over 3 days this month, and this decision can be appealed. The court found Alves sexually assaulted his victim early in the morning of the 31st of December in 2022, when she said that he raped her in a bathroom of an upscale Barcelona nightclub. And the court has also ordered that Alves pay over $162,000 to the victim. Then in netball, the South African under-21 national team will be playing in the Netball World Cup 2025 Qualifiers Africa, and that is at the University of Pretoria's Rembrandt Hall between the 18th to the 23rd of March. The purpose for this tournament is to qualify for the Netball World Youth Cup 2025. Under-21 head coach Jenny van Dijk has invited a group of 15 players to a training camp from the 22nd to the 26th of February at the University of Stellenbosch. And during this camp, she will select her final 12 players who will ultimately represent South Africa in March. Ending things off with marathon news, prize money for the wheelchair races at the 2024 London Marathon will be the same as for the able-bodied athletes, as the event becomes the first marathon to make the two parts equal, with an increase of $54,000. The prize pot for this year's wheelchair race will be $308,000, matching that of the able-bodied athletes, and all four winners of the elite races will receive $55,000. On that note, it is a wrap from my side. Ke nna Tumi Nkgapele, Modimo ke yo.
The most important thing for Maritzburg United and Paarl United is the special ticket to the last 16. The team of choice want to demonstrate how experienced they are in the game, but Paarl United are prepared to fight like true soldiers. KwaZulu-Natal takes on Western Cape. This is the Nedbank Cup round of 32. Maritzburg United versus Paarl United on Sunday, 25 February at 2:30 p.m. Live on SABC1 and SABC radio stations. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Hashtag We Love It Here. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
Economic news on SAFM. Facts and figures you can count on.
And it is time for a MoneyWeb market update with Jimmy Moyaha. Jimmy, good evening. Welcome to the show. So, the pedal craze, the pedal craze. I want to learn how to play it, actually. And there's one close to my house where, normally you would have a wall and they have a glass wall. So I want to try that out. But tell us about this craze.
Good afternoon, Aldrin. Good afternoon to me, and good afternoon to the listeners. It's something that's really hit South Africa by storm. One day there's absolutely nothing, and the next there's a paddle court on every corner that you can think of. I remember I was in Cape Town recently, and as you come out of the waterfront, in the middle of nowhere, there's a little paddle court there that people can get involved in. So we're going to look at that as a business prospect. They've partnered with Virgin Active through the Virgin Active Paddle Club, and we're going to speak to the director of that club and find out how the business is set up, how the franchises go, how much money these things cost, and how much money they potentially make. We're also going to have a conversation with a chief economist at Investec, Annabelle Bishop, as she reflects on the budget speech that was yesterday. Obviously, that contingency reserve account that we dug into was always going to be a concerning point as to how we tackle that and how we navigate that. So we're going to look at that in quite a bit of detail and understand the mechanics of that. And then we're also going to reflect on Goldfields' results. They put out results, and we're going to speak to their CEO, Mike Frazier, around those results and that performance. And then, because it is a Thursday, we've got our SME Spotlight today, and we're taking a look at a company called We Do Weddings. They do micro weddings, and we're going to look at what that means and how much that will cost. Quick summary of how the markets have been performing. The Rand did exceptionally poorly today. losing more than 1% against all the major currencies, against the euro, the pound, and the dollar, sitting back above 19 rand against the dollar. And if we have a quick look at some of the commodities prices, the Brent crude price is still above $83 a barrel. There, still a concern. Platinum and palladium both above $900. They're up 2% in the case of platinum and 1.3% in the case of palladium. Gold price sitting at $2,022 an ounce. But if we look at some of the equity markets, yesterday we saw something quite surprising from Nvidia. All eyes were on Nvidia post-market close, and that led to quite a resurgence in markets today. The Nasdaq is up 2.5%, S&P 500 up 1.5% in US trade, but all markets are in the green. Everything from Tokyo to Sydney to Hong Kong traded in the green today, and our local markets as well, with the all-share closing up about 1.5%. But we'll dig into these and other stories just after 6 p.m. I know you do have Floyd Chivambu in the studio with you, and you'd like to continue that conversation. So we'll be back after this.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate that. That's Jimmy Moyaha is back again just after 6 o'clock.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Good afternoon. Heavy backlogs out of Pretoria on Paul Kruger. There's broken down truck top at Capital Park, so very, very slow leaving the city centre area. Also load shedding in the Boysons Claremont area, so that run up from Dustwater Tunnel on Transaranya through the tunnel onto Bremer, through to Van der Hof heavy without traffic lights. Joburg not having a bad run today, actually. The N3's got a little bit of pressure between Alex and Germiston. No major obstructions, just weight of traffic really. And the Mike 1 slow from Parktown through to Boysons, looking fairly normal. Cape Town, you sit on the service road, the N1 service road, passing Canal Walk out towards the N7 North connections. That's very slow today. A lot of pressure around Tableview with load shedding. Bloberg Road and the Marine Drive option trying to get through Bayside area is very heavy. And the M5 remains jammed up on the Black River Parkway. Some heavy pressure going north on the M5 through Maitland. Queues from Rondebosch through towards the N1 Kubo get a change.
Golden Arrows and TS Galaxy have a huge disagreement on who gets to play in the next round of the Cup of Dreams. Abafana Bestende clashes with the Rockets. This is the Nedbank Cup round of 32. Golden Arrows versus TS Galaxy on Friday, 23 February at 6:30 p.m. Live on SABC Plus and SABC radio stations. Also available on sabcsport.com. Hashtag We Love It Here. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
Hashtag SAFMBTH.
0614-104-107, and you can also drop me an X at Aldrin Sampear. We're in conversation with the Deputy President of the EFF, Floyd Chivambu, as we zoom in to the election manifesto proposals, but our focus is on the economic policy proposals that the EFF has. Let's just quickly take some of your voice notes, and then we'll continue the conversation with him.
Good afternoon, Aldrin. You know, Aldrin, I don't think cadre deployment is wrong. It's a wrong thing to do. It's a wrong practice. I think it's right. But when you do cadre deployment, you need to take someone who's suitable for the position. Not someone because you like him, because or her, because we're in the same political party. But it must be someone that is fit for purpose and someone with credibility that they will do the job that is needed. You see, cadre deployment is wrong when someone is being put in the position only because he's a politician of a certain party, because that certain party has got a power in that municipality. That's where it's wrong. Imagine taking someone who is an opposition and come and sabotage all this municipality. Thank you so much. Monwa in Cape Town.
Good evening, Aldrin team. This is Nati from Cape Town. Can you please ask Mr. Chivambu there, what is their take on this inflation targeting method by the Reserve Bank, given the erosion of disposable income and then the middle class shrinking, because most of the people now, I don't think they are now classified as middle class in South Africa. Thank you.
Floyd, let's get your response to that.
No, thank you very much for the questions. And of course, I think, maybe just to make quick reflections on the other point, is that I don't think there's anything wrong with political parties screening potential employees of government departments to avoid nepotism. So the temptation always arises on those who are elected into positions.
Yeah, but they can't
choose,
reverse the decision by a panel. The panel that is made
they can, but they must just make sure that, look, why is the coincidence is that the people who are being employed in your department, either they come from your locality or almost all of them have the same name as you and all of those things. So those, from a political guidance point of view, have to be prevented, and that is what all political organizations should do, so that there is no nepotism in politics. Now, I think the issue that relates to monetary policy, like foundationally, even in the founding manifesto of the EFF, we have always said that monetary policy, particularly the manner in which we position the interest rates and the value of the currency, must be directed towards industrialization and creation of jobs. But currently it looks like it's just narrowly utilized for the protection of the currency only, the value of the currency, without looking as to what other dividend should we derive out of monetary policy, particularly the valuation of the currency and interest rates. So that is
the Reserve Bank governor said that's inflation targeting.
Yeah, that is a problematic and reactionary approach, by the way, in terms of how we utilize monetary policy in a much more efficient way, and we are totally opposed to the manner in which it's being handled, because this monetary policy is not being utilized to spur economic growth. Look at the admissions that were made by National Treasury during the budget speech now in Parliament, the 2024 budget. Admission number one is that South Africa's economy has grown at average of 0.8% since 2012. That is 12 years period of annual growth of 0.8%, less than 1% economic growth. Two is that the debt service cost is ballooning. And actually the National Treasury major document says that because the debt is ballooning, the debt service cost, which is the biggest expenditure item now on the
20%.
It's choking the economy, and it's choking public finances as well, to the extent that we're spending 356 billion rands to just pay for the interest of the money which the South African government has borrowed from multinational banks and institutions, and that is not sustainable, and it's most likely going to lead to a fiscal cliff where we will not be able to afford anything as a country. And at the core of that reality is an incapable government, because the role of government, one, is to grow the economy or to create conditions for economic growth, is to develop the productive forces or to create conditions for the development of the productive forces. And that is why the foundational politics of the EFF is that let's take the land and give it to everyone else for agricultural, industrial purposes, because that is a condition for economic growth. The ruling party must admit like that they've been given 30 years. And how do you explain that for the past 10, 12 years of relative stability in terms of the politics, you couldn't raise economic growth above 1% annually? And that has been the perennial feature. So they have to admit that they've dismally failed in terms of development of the productive forces, and they must give space to progressive political parties like the Economic Freedom Fighters to grow South Africa's economy, because it is only through economic growth that you can deal with unemployment levels, with high levels of poverty. You can then be able to also build massive sustainable infrastructure to take care of now and for the future.
I just quickly want to play this clip. This is the Minister of Finance, Enoch Godongwana. I spoke to him during the ANC's elective conference in Nasrec, and I asked him about the nationalization of the Reserve Bank. And just listen to what he has to say, and I wonder from the EFF side if that is a pill that the country must be willing to swallow.
And I mean, there's people who are driving this agenda. Some of them are outside the ANC. Some of them are shareholders. Now, there's an evaluation of the Reserve Bank. If you evaluate the Reserve Bank in terms of the share price, you've got 2 million shareholders multiplied by 10,000, which is currently the price. That would mean roughly a walk in the park. We can nationalize the Reserve Bank with our eyes closed. But if you had to say you are evaluating the bank in terms of including its asset base, the number is between 50 and 70 billion. Now we have got to make policy choices whether you spend that 50 or 70 billion rand in acquiring Reserve Bank, or I take part of it and pay the 350 and pay off it and put it into NAFSAs. Those are the choices we've got to make.
So as it stands currently, what would your recommendation be?
My
Not
recommendation,
nationalize the bank?
my recommendation is not to say let's undermine the resolution, but we must say we must do so when the resources of the country are sufficient enough that we can be able to do so.
Do so when the resources of the country are enough to do so.
No, but reading of the South African Reserve Bank Act is flawed, is totally wrong. But it demonstrates generally his lack of deeper understanding of many legislations that govern national treasury, not just the South African Reserve Bank. We introduced the legislation in the Parliament of the South African Reserve Bank Amendment Bill, and illustrates. So if you read into the South African Reserve Bank Act now, the one that establishes the bank, it says that whoever is a shareholder cannot claim dividend of upward of 10 cents per share. So the dividends that the South African Reserve Bank pays to the private shareholders now can never exceed 1.5 million rands. So the law doesn't permit that. And if the Reserve Bank makes profit, it deposits it into the National Revenue Fund, which is the money which later on, from the tax revenue that is collected and other sources, is utilized as the budget. But so there's no one who legitimately can go to a court of law that I am demanding 50 billion rand of the assets of the Reserve Bank, whilst there is no possibility in the foreseeable future, even if it is in 100 years' time, that you're going to make 50 billion rand from the Reserve Bank. What we were saying in terms of the nationalization of the Reserve Bank is that let us join more than 90% of central banks in the entirety of the world, which are owned by governments, are commonly owned. Central banks, including in America, even the Bank of England, in the United Kingdom, in most of the Western European countries, are centrally owned, so that they are able to be aligned in terms of what we were speaking about earlier, so that you can be able to align your monetary policy to your economic aspirations and interests. So if your economic immediate interest is about creation of jobs, is about development of industry, you must unashamedly get to align your central bank and its interests towards that particular direction. It can have some autonomy that is not explainable. What did you achieve from the autonomy of the South African Reserve Bank? Because the economy has not been growing. And you can utilize those fiscal or monetary instruments which the Reserve Bank has got control over to grow the economy, but there's not been anything that has been happening. So go and look into the main budget, not just the snippets which Godongwane read in Parliament. Go read the introduction by the DG of National Treasury. It says that since 2012 we have been growing at 0.8% economic growth, and that the debt is we're paying 356 billion to service interest of the debts that we owe, and that is choking the economy, is choking public finances. So where is the Reserve Bank in that equation? So why would you want to protect an institution which is not there? So the manner in which Godongwane is speaking about these issues, one, represents ignorance, but two, is utterly false and untrue. Like it's just part of the illiteracy that defines majority of these guys who are leading the ANC now.
Well, and then the argument that they sometimes make is that the shareholders have absolutely no powers. It's the MPC that decides. But I want to quickly move over from that point, electricity, because it's a major problem for the country. One of your proposals is aiming for the controlled participation of 30 to 40% in new generation capacity by the private sector in electricity generation. And then you also make the proposal of the build, operate, transfer. And this is specifically a proposal that you make in building a nuclear plant.
Yes. So we foundationally, in terms of the entire infrastructure, so there's a chapter that deals with national infrastructure in our Ready to Govern manifesto, the plan of action of the EFF, where we speak about build, operate, transfer. What is build, operate, transfer is when you say as government that I currently do not have money to build a road or the rail project, a high-speed rail between Durban and inland of South Africa, whether it is the Free State and Gauteng province and Limpopo. let me allow the private sector to do that, operate it, to benefit out of it for 20 years, and then later on will transfer it to the state. So we are saying, and we know this for a fact, that the companies that build nuclear power stations, they actually prefer to operate within a build, operate, transfer model, where they build the power station for yourselves using their own money, and then sell electricity to you for a period of 20 years, and then they give you back the power station after 20 years. So we can be able to construct a power station which can give us 6,000 megawatts. 6,000 megawatts, by the way, can keep on the lights for the entirety of Gauteng for the whole year without any load shedding. There are international companies, including Rosatom, which is the biggest nuclear power generator in the world, and generates more than 20% of electricity in the Russian Federation. They are willing to could build in a fiscally neutral way, meaning that government doesn't have to spend a single cent. They just need the permissions and the power purchase agreement, build 6,000 megawatts power station, give electricity at the cheapest rate. If you check the regulations about the cost of electricity, nuclear is the cheapest source of electricity, by the way, and it's clean energy. So we can be able to bring about sustainable electricity, because even before our government, we have had to appraise our systems and knowledge with just what are the alternatives. And Rosatoms, who have got to study intrinsically and understand that they can provide the solution in a much more sustainable basis. But also there are many other sources that can be looked into, inclusive of hydrogen, including the gas to power component. Because if the intention is to have electricity in South Africa, there is abundance of gas in eastern Tanzania and northern Mozambique. Like, that belt is quite adequate to could provide electricity for the entire subcontinent, literally from the end of the Sahara until this way. Just that gas belt alone, if you include the Inga as well in the Democratic Republic of Congo, we have dealt with the electricity question.
Let's quickly go to these calls. Khoto is joining us from Midrand. Khoto, please be brief. Good evening.
Yeah, evening to you, Aldrin, and your guest, to Comrade Floyd. Look, man, my question is in regard with special economic zone.
Yes.
As another tool for the EFF to support or to develop local economic development. But the approach which I want to see with them, vis-a-vis the one which is here currently, is that because currently what is happening is that you find your special economic zone, you check it in the coast, you check it here in Babeleri, you check it in Tshwane, you check it...
Sure, Khoto, give us the point.
Yes,
What's the point?
The point with me is like those lands are being owned by the private sector, and you find commercial banks...
Well, he just said earlier on that it's not, Khoto, if you're listening.
The law doesn't permit that, yeah. But I think the issue about special economic zones, which we are highlighting in the manifesto, is that let's declare all provinces outside of Gauteng and Durban.
But you don't want provinces.
No, like the areas, the geographic spaces, geographic spaces now. Because there's no industrial development in Limpopo. There's no mega industrial development in Limpopo, in the Northwest, in Mpumalanga, and all of those areas. That the tax incentives that would come with the special economic zones must apply to each and every area there. If you're going to create a minimum of 2,000 jobs, you must get the economic benefits that you're going to get if you were to be located in a special economic zones.
Okay.
That is what we say, that we need to decentralize economic development and make sure that the entirety of South Africa develops with even the aim of depopulating the now overpopulated the province of Gauteng, because it's not sustainable to continue in the manner that it is.
Bramoro is joining us from Bloemfontein. Bramoro, briefly, good evening.
Good evening, thank you. We wish we can have the fighter back again. My question to him is, what will be the role for migrants, especially black Africans, who are also trooping into South Africa? Some are already investing massively in the economy, but because of documentation, we don't see the benefit of all those black migrants. So what would be the policy of the EFF in terms of local economic empowerment with regards to African value?
Okay, thank you so much, Pramoro. Can I couple this with another question which falls on the other side? Duke says that, can you ask Floyd about the border policy? Do they still advocate for open border policy, or are they now advocating for borders and using African passports to travel within the continent?
Look, do you know, if we want to have sustainable and durable economic emancipation and development of South Africa, we have to intrinsically link it with the development of the entire African economy. And for that to optimally happen, you need to interlink the entire continent in terms of infrastructure. There must be real projects so that it's easier for us to trade goods and services amongst ourselves, so that it's easier for people to move from one area to another. That is the only viable way to could develop the economy. We cannot be locked into these colonially designed borders, which unfortunately were recognized by the OAU and the AU, but we need to integrate the entire African economy. There is plenty and abundance of natural and economic resources in all parts of the African continent, be it the platinum group metals in Zimbabwe and the gold, the sources of energy as well for batteries in Mozambique and Zimbabwe and Zambia and Malawi, the water resources in Lesotho.
I need you to go to
we need to
Bramoro's
integrate
point
all of
quickly
this for
before we
collective
say
development.
goodbye.
That is
Bramoro's
what
point.
we deal with. Yes.
Bramoro's point about utilizing foreign
Look,
nationals.
if you have to look into the history of Johannesburg, of the entirety of major economic centers in South Africa, of the mining sector in South Africa, all of that wealth was built by the so-called migrants. There's no migrants. All of us are Africans. We need to benefit optimally out of the economic resources of our continent. What we need to do is that the spatial allocation of development must be equal, so that moving from one place to another is your choice. You are not forced by your economic conditions.
Okay.
It's because maybe you just want to go and marry that side, or you want to do some other things that side. But otherwise, it must not be for economic purposes, because we would have developed the entire African economy, and that is at the center of our economic emancipation
Decentralized
struggle.
economic development can't only happen in Gauteng, can't only happen in Cape Town.
It
can't
must
only
happen everywhere.
Thank you so
Yes.
much. That is the Deputy President of the Economic Freedom Fighters, Floyd Shivambu. Unfortunately, we're not playing out with a song today. Apologies to the people that we couldn't get to your comments on Facebook as well as YouTube. Unfortunately, we had to change studios, and the studios that we are using don't have access to those platforms. Our parting shot quickly is from Kemi, who said, "Your journey is completely yours. It is unique. Others may try to steal part of it, tell it in their words, or shape it to suit them. Reality is no one can live it or own it but you. Take charge of your journey. It's yours and it's yours alone." Dotins, enjoy the rest of your evening, and remember to love each other.
The Red Devils have a responsibility to ensure there's happiness at Old Trafford.
Swung in dangerously. What a header. Scott McTominay.
However, the Cottagers have an agenda to disrupt that plan.
Swings it in. There it is. It's 3-1. This Rodrigo Muniz again.
This is the Premier League. Manchester